it's empty, okay? But this is what we want it to look like ultimately. So challenge 1, challenge 2, 3, 4, 5, blackjack, blah, blah, blah. We're going to start off with challenge 1 in this video, okay? And we're just going to work and figure out how to actually do that. So let's get started on this challenge, okay? The first thing we're gonna need to do is, so by the way, the reason why I have the borders around it is so you can kind of see like visually, you know, once we're actually working on this challenge, you'll see how, you know, each border is supposed to represent like a div or a container. And if you don't know what the heck that is, don't worry, you'll learn. And I'll guide you through the process, okay? So the first thing we're gonna do is just add the HTML content, okay? So where it says challenge 1, your age and days, and maybe the click me button and the reset button, and we'll go from there, okay? So let's get started. On the left hand side, I want to show you in VS Code here, I have index.html file, and right next to it I have a static folder. In static I have my CSS, I have my images, I have my JS and sounds, okay? So don't worry about that for now. What you are going to worry about is CSS and JavaScript, okay? And I don't want to just show you JavaScript by itself. I can and I will a little bit here and there, but my main goal is to show you JavaScript and how it works together with everything else, okay? So, you know, I'll show you a few things in JavaScript right now. So I'll go over to my JavaScript and I'll write something like alert hello, okay? And I'm gonna hit save. I'm gonna go back to my index.html file and I'll write my doc tab. It'll autocomplete a bunch of useful, common, normal stuff, and so I'll just keep that there. And for document, I will say, let's see, JavaScript on steroids. And when I come over here and I hit refresh, the tab, you'll see it says JavaScript on steroids. Now I need to link my JavaScript sheet to my HTML. Otherwise, it's not going to run the JavaScript code. Okay, it's kind of like the CSS and how that worked. Now on the left-hand side, you can see how they're related to each other. Okay, index is over here, and then you got to go in the static folder. Then you got to go in the JS folder, and then you got to click on, or then you got to select script.js. So we're going to do just that, okay? So right before the body tag is about to end, I'm going to add a script tag, and I will say something along the lines of source, and I'll make the source static slash JS slash script.js, okay? I'll hit save. And I'll hit refresh, and you can see that the JavaScript code just ran, and now it says hello. Okay, this alert popped up. I can change this to hi, and I can come here, refresh, and now you can see the dialog box popped up and it says hi. I can comment this out. I can say console.log hello and hit save. I can hit right click inspect. I'll go into console, I'll refresh, and when I hit refresh, what you see here, let's make that bigger. What you see here, it says hello, okay? And this is the console. So anything I write and I say console.log, it'll just show up in the console right here. Console is very, very useful, and if you have Chrome, you can pop into this and check it out. Developer tools, and I'm sure Mozilla Firefox has those developer tools as well. Okay, but I encourage you to use Chrome because that's what we're going to be using for this course. So now let's get started and see how can we add this challenge 1, your age and days, right? We're going to just add the HTML content. I'm just going to comment out some of the JavaScript, and we'll work on the JavaScript part together. I'm also going to hide the tab by doing Command B. Okay, I'm going to hide that little tab right there. And we're going to go in our body and we're going to get started. So first, I'm going to write an H2 tag because I think that's an H2. I'm going to right click, inspect, and yeah, that's H2. Okay, so I'm going to go back, and my H2 tag, I'm going to write this. So boom, refresh. Challenge 1, your age and days. So cool, we're done with that part of the code. Now, I want to add a few buttons and you know, make them look kind of nice, how these look. So let's first just add a button, and then the button will say click me, and then we'll have another button and that'll say reset. Okay, I'll come over here, refresh, and now we have two buttons. Okay, cool. So we got the buttons, but now what? Now we want to make it look a little bit nicer. So what I'm going to do is, instead of designing my own epic buttons, I'm just going to use Bootstrap, and Bootstrap makes it really easy to just style my stuff and make it look a lot nicer, okay, without me having to write a lot of code to style my button. I'm going to go get Bootstrap and just do it. So here, Bootstrap CDN. And quick Bootstrap CDN stack path. I'll grab this complete CSS path, okay, CSS. I have copied it, and I'm going to go over here and I will say link, and then paste that Bootstrap. Okay, now that that Bootstrap has been pasted, all this is, by the way, guys, all this is, by the way, is just a CSS file that's hosted online. Okay, so you could take the CSS file and you could actually paste it into your own CSS file like that, and notice it's like many lines of code. It just is all horizontal and on one line. But I wouldn't do that. I'll just use the one that's online. Okay, so I'm just gonna link to that path. That's kind of all we're doing here by linking to that path. Instead of linking to a local path, we're linking to an online path. And after linking to it, for these buttons, I'm just gonna add the class button primary for this one. And now what you're gonna notice, if I come here and hit refresh, this looks like a beautiful, juicy Bootstrap button. Okay, and then for this button, I'm gonna add class is equal to button danger, like that. Okay, hit refresh, and you can see now it looks like a nice, juicy Bootstrap danger button. Okay, so you have the blue button, we have the red button. Now, what else is going on this page, right? So on this page, we have all this content nice and centered, and whereas on ours, we actually don't have it nice and centered, right? If I look at ours, it's kind of like all the way to the top left. It's like squeezed up there. So we want to, if you notice, you know, we kind of want to bring it in the middle and give it a little spacing from the top. So we're going to do that. So we're just going to play around with it and see how we can do it, okay? I'm going to put a container here in a second, because what I want to do, I want to show you guys something called Flexbox, okay? And Flexbox makes your life really easy. It's going to allow you to put things in a nice little grid and organize them, instead of how we had to do it before we had Flexboxes. You had to use like coordinates and percentages and do a lot of math to create things into their own grids and columns. Well, with Flexbox, it makes it really easy to put things either in a row or in a column, and it just calculates everything for you. It looks super nice and organized, okay? So that's what we're gonna do. First, I will create a container class, okay? I'm gonna call this container 1. Okay. I have this, move this over, and now I'm gonna create a Flexbox class. Okay, I'm gonna give this class Flexbox container 1, like that. And I'm gonna save this guy. I'll hit div, and I'll add in this button. Okay, and I'll just put each of these buttons in their own divs. Okay, so cool. So I have basically what I'm doing is I'm putting a flex box at the top, and inside of it I'm putting in two buttons, and each of those buttons is in its own div. Okay, so I'm gonna hit refresh here, and you just see that each button is in its own div. Now what I want to do is put them all kind of in one space. So before I go and do all of that, let's just do flexbox container 1, and I'm gonna go in here and I'll just add a border. Okay, I'll add 1 pixel. Let's do solid and black. Come here, refresh, flexbox container 1. Let's go back here. Why isn't it showing up? Oh, obviously because I didn't link to the sheet. So I'm just going to do link, and I'm going to do static slash CSS slash style.css, refresh here, and now you can see that it's actually showing up somewhat. Okay, so we got those 2 divs there, and then what I actually want to do is I want to say display flex. Okay, so I'm doing display flex now, and I'm gonna do flex. Let's add a little bit of padding to this. Okay, adding a little bit of padding here. Oh, and this div here, let's move this down. So sorry, my container div wasn't closing all the way at the bottom. That's kind of where some of the stupid errors were coming from. I don't know what the heck I'm doing here. And this div is supposed to be closing all the way at the bottom here. Cool. So now what's happening is this div is being closed here, this is closed here, this is closed here, and this one's closed there. Cool. Now let's refresh. Okay, cool. So now we have the 2 buttons inside of one container. Okay, this is the container. This is what I added the border around. Okay, so if you notice here, right, I'm gonna hover over the elements here real quick. I'm gonna move this here, and I'm hovering over the container element, and you can see that this element that says flexbox container 1, that's where actually that border is, and that's the one you actually see highlighted right now, right? Okay, now what I want to do is add some padding in between the buttons too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put each of the buttons in their own little box, because right now they're part of one flex box, so they're kind of like pushing together with each other. So what I want to actually do is give them a little breathing room. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say inside of the flexbox container class, if there's any div, just give it a padding of 10 pixels. And so now you see, because click me is a div and reset is a div, it's giving it its own space. I can also say, hey, border, add 1 pixel solid black here, and so now you can see that the reset and click me are actually their own little thing. And even though their own little thing, they have a little padding inside, right? So if I actually take away the padding, right, I click this, you can see what happens. Or if I go in here and take away the padding, so let's see on the right side if it lets me take that away. Right click right here, yep, right there. So if I take that padding away, you see how those buttons are squeezed together like that. But then when I add padding, they get a little bit of breathing room. So now what this is doing is that inside of this class, every single div, it's selecting that, and I'm just styling each of those divs that's only within this particular container class. Okay, hopefully you're following me so far. Okay, so right now we're just kind of doing the styling part. We're gonna add the JavaScript part in just a little bit. So now what do we want to do? Okay, we have all of this together. One thing we want to do is that we want to justify our content. Okay, we want to justify our content, and we want to justify it as space around. And when we refresh, it's adding space around it. So Flexbox has like smart things. Okay, there's some other options too. For example, see if VS Codes will make those suggestions for you. So to justify content, and then see it does right, flex start, flex end. So I could do flex start, for example. Okay, hit this, refresh, and now it's at flex start. I could also do flex end, and now they're all the way to the right of the flex box, right, where the flex box is ending. So have you ever seen those testimonials on a page where at the bottom, like some of them are starting from the left to right, and then right below it, it starts from right to left, and then right below it starts from left to right? Well, using Flexbox, you can actually make it really easy for you to do, and it's kind of cool. And we'll do flex here as well. So there we go. Justify content, we'll add a flex wrap. Flex wrap will come in handy later on when we have things that need to wrap around or start going to new lines. So it won't really take too much effect right now, but I'll show you what it does afterward. And instead of flex end, we're gonna again do space around. You can also do space between, space evenly. Cool. So our div 1 is looking somewhat decent. We're gonna do align items center. Okay. Now what we want to do is make sure that the entire challenge is inside of a container. So what I'm going to do is I already have it inside of a container. What I want to do is just make it visual so you can actually see it. Okay. So I'm just going to do dot container 1, and then I'll just do border 1 pixel solid black. Okay. And there we go. So now you can see that the entire thing is actually inside of one container. And this one over here is a flex box inside. That flex box has 2 flex items, and one is click me and one is reset. Okay. I can do, different kinds of things with this. Like I can choose my flex direction. So I can do row, which is usually by default, and I can also do column. And now notice that each of those are in its own column, which again is pretty cool how it makes it so easy for you by just doing column. I can also do column reverse if I wanted to switch their orders, right? And I can also do row reverse. So here, now reset and click me gets switched up. So pretty nice, but right now we're just gonna keep it at row. Now what we wanna do is when somebody clicks click me, it should essentially add how many days old you are, okay, and then let you reset it. So we're gonna now work on that. Okay, so what we're gonna do for this is we're gonna go inside of our index.html. We're gonna go right below our div flexbox container 1. We're gonna create another div here. We're gonna give it the same class of flexbox container 1 because we want to inherit its styling. And then inside of here, I'm gonna create a div, and I'll give it an idea of flexbox result. Okay, just like that. So now this is gonna be empty. This is gonna be empty. There's nothing in there yet. What we're gonna do is we're gonna create a h2 element and we're gonna add it in there. So that's kind of where that is gonna take place, but you're not gonna see that right away. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we're gonna go to our script. I will remove all of this, and this is gonna be our challenge 1, your age in days. Now this is the fun JavaScript part, okay? Okay, how do we do age in days? Well, think about it. First, what we need is, here's what we need to get, okay? We need to see what year somebody was born in. Okay, so let's say that you were born in 1994. Well, how would I figure out how many days old you are? In a simple way, okay, I will take your age and just multiply it by 365 because there are 365 days in a year, and that will give me your age in days. So if you're 10 years old, I'll do 10 multiplied by 365. That number, 3,650, those will be the number of days, and that's how old you are. And that's essentially what we're going to be doing here. Okay, I'm going to take the age and then just subtract. So for example, I can do something like variable birth year is equal to 1994. Whoops, let's do this. Let's do birth year. It's 1994. Now I'm gonna do 2018 minus birth, or sorry, I can do this. Age in days, right? What's the formula for age in days? Well, that's just 2018, the current year, minus your birth year. Okay. And now if I print out age in days, it says 20, or sorry, I gotta do this multiplied. Let's put a parentheses around this, multiplied by 365. Okay. Now if I do age in days, it gives me 8,760, and that's how many days old I am. So that's essentially it. It's not too complicated. It's a pretty straight up thing. So we're gonna do birth year is equal to, but how we're gonna now take this input is by using something called prompt, okay? So for example, I can say variable, let's see, apple, okay? I will say equals prompt, how many apples do you eat every day? Question mark. And now notice it just pulled up a prompt, okay? It says how many apples do you eat every day? I will say 6 and hit enter. Now that I've done that, I'm gonna go in the console and hit apple, and look, it says 6. It gives me a 6 as a string. Very cool. Okay, so that's the information that you're actually going to be, that's how you're going to be taking in information from the user. That's how you're going to be using the prompt. So I'm going to go here and I'll say prompt, what year were you born, good friend? Okay, so let's save it. Let's come here, let's refresh, and boom, there it is. I was born in 1994. Awesome. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna connect that button to triggering this. Okay, so every time we click, instead of just me refreshing the page and it popping up this prompt, what I want to do is that it should pop up once I click the click me button. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wrap this inside of a function. I'll call this function age in days. All right. And I'll go in my index.html, and what I'll say is that in this button, I'm going to give it another attribute, and I'll say on click, run that function age in days. Okay, let's say run that function. So I'll hit refresh, and now look, the prompt didn't pop up, but when I click me, the prompt pops up. Okay, pops up. Cool. So that's pretty exciting so far. Let's keep going. We got our birth here. What can we do now? Well, let's just pop up. Hopefully it's Postmates and we got some delicious food. We'll see how it is. It's probably really good. And let's just keep rolling with it. Okay, so I'm gonna do var. All right, so age in days. Okay, we just did birth year, and now we're gonna take your age in days. Okay, how are we gonna do that? I'm gonna call this age in days a bad variable name because the function is called this. So I will just do age in days. Okay, terrible. Normally shouldn't do that, but I just will. Okay, and I'm gonna move on with this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say 2018 minus birth year. That's kind of what we did earlier, multiplied by 365. That's gonna give me the age in days, okay, of this person. And let's actually just print it out to the console. So I'm going to do console.log age in days, which is a variable here. I'll go here. I'll hit refresh. Now I'll click me, and I'll do 1994. And in the console, it's giving me the right result. Okay, 8,760. The only problem is that it's giving me in the console, but it needs to give it to me actually in our file, right? Or in our index.html. So what we need to do is add it to that. Okay, this is something called DOM, D-O-M, document object model, and we just need to create a new H2 element and just put it in our DOM. Okay, so I'll show you exactly how we're gonna do that. You see this little empty box here? We're gonna just attach it kind of to that. So let's get started with that. I'm gonna say create an H1 variable. I'm gonna say document.create element, and I'll create a H1 element. Okay, now once I create that H1 element, I'm gonna say text answer document.create text node. Okay, so I'm now creating text, and I'm gonna add that ultimately to the H1 content. Okay, so I'm gonna say you are here plus age in days. So this is what we're doing right now, is string concatenation. So we're taking a string and then we're adding a variable to it. Okay, it's just a fancy way of saying like we're attaching two strings together. Got it? Okay, good. All right, let's keep going. So I'm gonna take this, I will add days old to that. Okay, so this is gonna create that text node. This I'm grabbing this age and days over here, and that's gonna be my text answer. Once I create this text answer, I want to add it to my H1. Okay, so how do I do that? I'm gonna say set h1.set attribute, and I'm gonna say set its ID to age in days, and then I want to do h1.append child text answer, and then lastly what I want to do is document.get element by ID flex box result. Okay, and append child H1. A lot going on here, and I'm gonna explain it in just a second. So I'm gonna delete all of this, or that one line. I'm gonna hit refresh, I'll hit click me, I'll hit 1994, and boom, you can see that it says you are 8,760 days old in my code. Okay, doesn't say it anywhere else, and not in the console, not in an alert. It actually says it right in my page. So how is this working? Okay, I can always right click and hit inspect. Whenever you're in doubt, just inspect. Okay, think of it like you're a detective and you're trying to figure out like what's actually taking place. So while I'm looking at this, if I hover over, I can see my age and days. And another thing I want you to notice is, you see here on line 8 where we're setting this attribute and we're saying set this H1 tag's ID to age in days. Well, check it out. This H1 now has an ID which is age in days. And then what I'm doing is I'm adding that little H1 that I created, right? To that I'm appending the text answer I created earlier. So it's adding this guy right here to the H1. And then once it does that, I go grab the flexbox result, okay, which is right over here, flexbox result. And to that, I append a child, which is the H1 tag I ended up creating. Okay, so if I hit refresh, it goes away. When I hit click me, 1994, it calculates it for me and gives me how old I am. Now we just need to do two things. One, it's to make sure that when we hit reset, this actually goes away. Okay, and that one is not as hard. So I'm gonna do function reset, and I'll say take that document, get that particular element by its ID. Okay, and the ID we gave it, flexbox result, that's the ID of it, right? So I'm gonna do flexbox result, or actually I'm gonna do age in days, because that's the ID that this guy has. So we want to grab that guy and remove him. Okay, so I'm going to do get element age and days, and I'm just going to call remove on it. And now I just want to make sure that this function reset runs when I click the reset button. See if you can figure this part out, because we did the click me together where I gave click me the ability to run this function age and days. See if you can get the reset one to figure it out. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to do it. So if you didn't get it, don't worry. Beat yourself up just a little bit because you should have gotten it. But if not, you know what? It's okay. This happens, and we're here to learn, and we'll just figure it out together, okay? You and me, okay? We're in this battle together, so let's figure it out. I'm going to go to my button, okay, reset, and I'm just going to go here, and I'll say on click, and I will say run the function reset. That's it. So now I'll refresh. I'll hit click me 1994. You are 8,760 days old. I'll hit reset, and boom, it just grabs that div and just deletes it. So now it's gone. Okay. If I actually removed all the borders, you wouldn't even see anything here. It just look empty to you. And the last thing we want to do in this challenge is just make sure everything is kind of like centralized. So what I want to do is I will go to my style.css. I'll go to my container. And I'm going to do margin 0 auto, and I'll hit refresh here, and I'm going to go to my width, and I'll make my width like about 75%, and I'll hit refresh. And now you can see that it's a little bit more centralized, right? But the text is still not centralized. So last thing I want to do is align text, or I think it's text align, and center. I'm not a front-end expert, guys. I barely spend any time on front-end. So take this with a grain of salt. But this is good. I'm going to save it. I'm going to come here, refresh. Look at that. Nice and centralized, looking sexy. We're ready to get into our challenge 2. Cats didn't run across this border, right? They didn't run across to the right or to the left. They nicely move on to a new line in this case, okay? So how are these images intelligent like that? How does that happen? How does it know to automatically go to a new line when it can't fit on the top one anymore? And I'm going to show you some really cool ways to be able to make something in a really super simple way, the simplest way, okay, to do that, okay? Normally it used to require math and for you to know percentages. There's something so much easier. So it's a little bit of how we did the last one, the age in days, except I'm going to break this one down a little bit more, okay? So first, I'm just going to take a picture of this challenge right here. Let's just talk about this particular challenge and nothing else, okay? So let's go like this and talk about this challenge. Now, everything that's in the gray area in this picture, I want you to think of that as the body, okay? That's the body of the entire HTML document. So for example, you know, here, this white area, right, that's the body. The thing in the borders, like these over here, those are the containers, right? So we made the containers and then we shrunk them, right? And we made it like so it's more centered. All the content is centered on the page. But the outside of it and like the whole document is actually like the body, okay? So I just want you to be aware of that distinction. Now, first, I want to talk about this, okay? So this is a container that contains everything about our challenge, okay? So it's literally just a div, okay? And that div has a class of container. That's all this is. So this red thing, I'm just going to call this a container. All right, now what's going on with the rest of the stuff, right? This challenge thing is just in the container, and the button we can just say that it's in a container. Right now I have it in its own div, which is like a flexbox div, but that's really not necessary, and in this challenge we're not going to even do that, but you can if you want to. So we're going to ignore the button, but the button is essentially, just think of it like it's in the same place as where the challenge is, okay? It's just in the container, that's it. And now, where are these cats, right? These cats are actually inside of something we called in CSS a flexbox. So they're actually inside of another div, okay? So I'm gonna highlight this blue, and I'm gonna make it a little bit tricky, but I'm gonna do this like this, and then I'm gonna move this. Oops. I'm gonna move this blue bar right on top of this. Okay, that should be good enough. Okay, So that blue box is another div inside of the container div. Okay, so the container is the parent, and this blue one is not the parent. Okay, it's the child, and this is the flexbox div. Okay. Within this flexbox div, we have a few items. Now, flexbox is something that's pretty intelligent, and it has pretty smart built-in ways of telling it to, hey, space things evenly, or when something runs across, make sure it doesn't run across. Instead, it actually runs down below and starts a new line. Okay, so we're gonna talk about that too. And all these the images, they're just image elements. Okay, so if I have to highlight them, I'll highlight them for you as well. So each of these are just image elements. That's it. Okay, so if I had to write that down, I would just write img here, and that's it. It's just the image class or the image element. That's all those are. Now, where this padding thing is coming from, right? Like, how is there this spacing that takes place in between? So if I have to draw this out, how is this happening? So let me go here. I'm gonna type this out because my handwriting is not the best. Okay, this 10 pixel margin, where is that taking place? That's actually taking place in the flexbox. So in the flexbox styling, we can actually define it to just space all of that div's items by 10 pixels. So that's essentially what's causing that spacing. Okay. Now, what is causing it to wrap? Instead of going across the body and running into the body, right, and getting outside of the flexbox div or the original container, the reason why when you pop open a new image, it goes down below is because of something called wrapping in Flexbox. And there's an intelligent way how wrapping works. So here, I'm going to just highlight it. And essentially the code we have for that is flex wrap. Okay. So that's the specific code that's actually making the wrapping work. And another thing I want you to be aware of is how there is how everything is spaced kind of evenly, and then there's space around it. Okay, so notice here, right? This is not just that 10 padding, this is something else. Okay, and then notice this here and notice this here, right? How is that? So this is actually something we call space around. Okay, and space around is what's causing this to happen. And more specifically, the code, the line of code would be this. So let me delete this and then write in here, if it would let me, justify content space around. Okay, like that. So that's actually what's allowing me to have that equal spacing take place. Okay, so at the end of the day, we have two divs. One is the container div, and then the one is the flexbox div. Flexbox div, it's intelligent. We just tell it, hey, make all the items of that div flex. So all the link that basically somebody put together this website where it's called like catapi.com, and every time you run their URL, it gets you a new image every single time, some random new image. So I thought that'd be cool, and it makes our life a lot easier. Okay, so if I paste that every time and run it, you can see I keep getting a newer and newer image. And also, because I want a small image, in the arguments of the URL parameter, I say size is equal to small. Okay, and type is GIF. Now you could probably change the type, you could probably change the source, and you could probably change the size, but I like small and I like GIF because GIFs are awesome. So let's go back to our JavaScript steroids thing, and I'm just gonna paste that I'm just gonna paste it. That's it. Okay, I'm just gonna paste it as a source, and we're gonna hit refresh, and you can see one of the images popping up in the Flexbox, right? It's popping up in the Flexbox. Let's try putting another image and another image, and then refreshing and seeing what happens. So now what I want you to notice is that these images are really close to each other, and there's no padding, right? So if I put this to the left-hand side, whoops. If I put this to the left-hand side, you see that this has padding, except our images on the right have absolutely no padding. And then another thing I want you to see is that it actually runs across instead of running on a new line, right? So if I added another image here, it'll kind of look really ugly. And I press refresh. Like, notice that the images are now just literally running across, right? Running across the page. If I refresh again, same thing. Those are running across. So now, what should I do? Well, first, let's just highlight each image green so you can actually see each of the elements inside of that Flexbox, okay, or inside of that container. So I'm going to say Flexbox container 2, and I'll go here and I'll say select the image. Okay, so I can go one level down that container and just select the image, and I'm gonna give border, and I'll say 1 pixel solid, and I'll say green. Okay, and we'll refresh, and now you can see that each image has a green border around it, so you can kind of see what that, like, which part of that is the image. Okay, so yeah, it's a little confusing because there's an overlap between the Flexbox and the image, but I think you get the idea, right? Okay, so now how can we make it so the images actually run across, run down? Okay, so first let's do that. So make sure that the image is actually running down. So my container, the type is flex, and then what I want to do is I want to say flex wrap and enable the wrap. And when I hit refresh, you'll notice that now when it's about to run across the div or the Flexbox, it'll automatically go to the new line. So now that's a pretty good sign. That's a pretty good thing that we have done. But if we look at the padding is still kind of annoying. And also it spaces it kind of weirdly, right? It's all left justified, and it's not centralized, and it doesn't feel like equal amount of spacing, and it kind of feels a little messy, right? So if I full screen the page, it looks like this, and maybe if I put a few more cats here, and now if I full screen the page, yeah, you know, I'm not a really big fan of it. So one thing we want to do definitely is add some padding. Let's try adding some padding here. Okay, so now this is a little bit better. That's maybe what we want most of, because we definitely want some padding to be taking place, right? And what we're essentially doing is between each image, we're adding some padding. So that's what we're doing. Before we had the padding in the div, but what we actually want the padding in is between each image element. So now between each image element, it has a padding of 10. So this has a padding of 10, and this has a padding of 10. That's why they're kind of equally they're spaced out from one another. Now notice how these images, like the images below, are lining up to the images at the top, but notice how what we had on this page, these images at the bottom are not actually lining up to the images at the top, right? They're not left justified. They're more like centralized in a really intelligent way. So to do that, what we essentially need to do is say justify content, and we want to say space around. Okay, and once I hit refresh, you can see that because of space around, the images at the bottom don't actually run all the way to the left. They're more centralized. Okay, cool. So flex boxes are pretty awesome, and they make our life, you know, a lot easier. So we've added the padding, we have the images, we pretty much have everything we need at this point, right? The challenge is essentially complete at this point. The only thing that we need to do is make it so that when we hit the generate cat button, it automatically creates the image element, right? Instead of us having, right now we're manually writing it. So what we want to do is we hit the generate cat button, it automatically adds those cats. So I'm gonna do generate cat, add the cats for me. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna delete all the cats for now, okay? Once I delete all the cats, you can see that the cats are gone. If I make the page full and I hit generate cat, because I don't have any JavaScript attached yet to my page, well, nothing is going to actually take place, right? Nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to get added. So now we need to do a little bit of JavaScript magic, okay? But that part is actually very, very, very simple. So what we want to do is I'm going to go here and I'll give this an ID. Okay, so I'll call it cat gen button. Okay, you can really call it whatever you want. Again, let me just see what I have here. So the naming convention is the same. We'll actually call this cat generator right here. Okay, we'll call it cat generator. So that's the ID of this green button here. And then I'm gonna go over here and I'll add something called on click. And I'll say on click, run a function called generate cat. Now I'm gonna go over to my JavaScript, and in my JavaScript, I'm gonna create a function called generate cat. And what this is essentially gonna do is it's gonna first get that, it's gonna create an image element. Then I want to create a div element. So I'm going to say, or actually we don't need to create a div element, but what I do need to do is get access to the Flexbox div. Okay, so I'm going to do this and I'm going to say get element by ID. So what I need access to is actually this guy right over here. And the idea is that once I can get access to this container, I want to just keep appending image elements to this every time somebody clicks a button. So to get access to this, let's just give it an ID. So that way it'll make getting access to this a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm going to say ID is equal to flexbox or flexcatgen. That's the ID I'm going to give it. Let's go over to our JavaScript. I will say flexbox or flexcatgen, and that should get us that div. And now what I want to do is set the image's source. Okay, so the image element that I created earlier, I want to set its source to a link, and that link in this case will be the cat whatever link. And then what I want to do at the end is to that div append a child, and that child is going to be the image. Okay, and save. I'll hit refresh and I'll hit generate cat, and boom, it works. And generate cat, and it works. And generate cat, and generate cat. And if I refresh, you can see how it's working. Cool. There's only one thing that we actually need to add, and we're gonna do that in just a second. Okay, so the box shadows are not there. Notice with my cat, it looks pretty clean, right? You see how the image looks like it's like popping out a little bit. That's what I want to give you, because otherwise you're gonna have an image that looks really flat and your website looks pretty stupid and amateurish, right? You want to give it a little pizzazz to it. So I'm gonna just pretty much have you copy my code here for that. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna copy my box shadow code, and you can play around with it so you can really see how it works. But there are websites like CSS Matic or something, I think, and you can go to them and actually create boxes and shadows and things like that, like visually, and it gives you the CSS code for it. All right, so I'm gonna go in image here. I'll paste it here, and we'll refresh and generate cat, and generate cat, and generate cat. And, you know, it looks like the box shadow is popping up over here. and it looks like that part of it is looking pretty good. Now another thing I want to do, I'm going to hit refresh, take that away. Okay, so I don't actually even need padding, because that padding was adding the white border around and actually didn't make it look that good. But with the space even, or the space around that we did with the flexbox, it automatically gives it inherent padding, and that kind of looks really nice, right? And that's essentially what we want. So it's looking pretty good, honestly, at this point. A few things we can actually improve here is, first of all, we can take away the borders because they look a little ugly. The only reason I had them is so you can kind of compare them with the little picture that I made, but I would pretty much take away, like, let's say at least that border, and then the red borders I have, right? Maybe just make them black for now. Ultimately, you don't want to have any borders. The reason why I have the borders there right now is so you can see very easily like what is what. Okay, so I'll refresh, and I just made the borders black, so this way it just looks a little bit cleaner. Now you might notice that there's a lot of like repetition of code. Okay, so what I mean by that, we have display flex, and for flexbox container 1 I have display flex. I have flex wrap wrap. I have for flexbox container 1 flex wrap wrap. Flex direction row, by default flex direction is row. I only just chose to write it here so you can see, you know, what it actually is. And then we also have justify content space around. And then I have border 1 pixel black, and I have border 1 pixel black. So since there's so much overlap of the code, there's really no reason to write its own, like write these lines again. What I can actually just do is say flex box container 2, okay, like that, and just hit save and delete this. And when I come over here, refresh, and hit generate cat, you see it generates my cats, and my cats look pretty good. Okay, so that's the situation with that guy. Container 2, border 1 pixel solid, width 75%, and you can see like the code is the exact same as container 1. So what can you do, right? You just the same thing. We'll do container dot container 2. Okay, so essentially the same code is there. Okay, and you can see that that's also working just fine. All right, so now when I do generate cat, right, it's still good, but here's the thing. One thing that makes it look a little ugly is like, look, there's no padding or margin between those images. There's no breathing room for the images. Whereas if you look at my final version, right, look at the images and look how there's this nice little margin between the images. So we're gonna basically add that. And here, you're also going to get to play around with the difference of padding and margin, okay? A lot of the times, you want to just be using margin, but sometimes you should use padding. Generally, I like to actually use margin. So here, like, you'll notice what happens. I'll do 10 pixels here, right? To that image, I'm going to add a padding here, and I'll refresh. And you'll notice how it's adding the little white thing, because essentially what it's doing is extending it out. But what we want to do is we want to give a gap between each image element. So now instead of adding padding, I'll say margin, and I'll go refresh, and I'll do generate cat a few times, and boom, look at that. Instead of like extending each image box, what it did is it just added spacing between each image box. Okay, so now this looks super clean. I love it. I hope you love it. And you can see the power of flex boxes, right? The more I hit generate cats, the container grows to fit it. The flex box grows to fix it, to fit it. And then the flex box is also very intelligent in terms of how it wraps, how it spaces around evenly, how it centralizes it. So I am a big fan. I love it. And there you have it. This is what your CSS actually should look like, okay? These were the new things that we added, literally like this, and I believe this line here, okay? That was all that was added in the CSS for